A millionaire, surrounded by luxury and prestige, suddenly finds himself facing a scene he would never have imagined. Upon arriving at the entrance of a five-star hotel, he encounters his ex-wife, destitute, seeking refuge with 4 children who look exactly like him. The shock hit him like a punch to the gut, as if the past, with all its decisions, mistakes, and wounds, had come back to collect everything at once. He stood there, motionless, not knowing how to react to what was unfolding before. His eyes. Have you ever had the feeling that the universe decided to completely turn your life upside down just when everything seemed under control? That what you worked hardest to bury in the past resurfaced at the most unlikely moment, in a way impossible to ignore? That was exactly what happened to Daniel Harper, a hotel magnate in Los Angeles, on the night his carefully planned world nearly crumbled, not due to a financial crisis or a failed merger, but because of a scene he would have never expected to witness upon entering the lobby of one of his own hotels. You are about to witness one of the most shocking stories of your life. Watch it until the end, and I assure you, your way of looking at life will never be the same. But tell me something, what would you do if you suddenly discovered that you had 4 children of whom no one ever told you? And also, how would you react if the woman you once loved and separated from amidst deep wounds reappeared before you, destitute, accompanied precisely by those children? It's easy to think we would know what to do, but the truth, most of us would be paralyzed. That's what happened to Daniel. In the midst of an extraordinary storm, he found himself facing Emily, his ex-wife, soaked, holding 4 children who looked like a younger version of himself. And no, that was not a coincidence. Emily trembled from the cold, but maintained her composure. Her simple clothes clung to her body from the rain, and the children's eyes followed her as if she were the only safe point in the world. Daniel, paralyzed, watched from a distance. Something inside him began to break when the little one's eyes met his. The hotel receptionist, unaware of anything, simply repeated the protocol. No card, no accommodation. But Daniel knew he could not ignore what he was seeing. It was real. It was personal. It was his. It was in that instant that he did something he hadn't done in years. He followed the impulse of his heart. He interrupted the receptionist and ordered that the presidential suite be prepared for Emily and the 4 little ones. His voice, though firm, carried a tone no one there had ever heard before, that of a scared, vulnerable man trying to understand how that past, which he thought was buried, was now right in front of him, breathing, speaking, and looking at him with the same eyes that every morning returned his reflection in the mirror. Emily turned, surprised to hear that voice she hadn't heard in 6 years. Her eyes widened for a second, revealing a mix of relief and fear. There were so many unspoken things between them that the silence weighed heavier than any word. The children, 4 little ones no more than 7 years old, looked at Daniel with curiosity. One of them, a girl with light brown hair, held a wet notebook against her chest and looked at it with the same intensity with which he used to gaze at his first architectural works. Daniel stood there, trying to understand how this story could have unfolded without him knowing absolutely anything. He remembered perfectly. Before a risky surgery years ago, he had left samples at a fertility bank just in case. Later, he was told they had been discarded due to a system error. And now, there they were, 4 children, with his face. The impact was so great that he could barely react when one of them, the smallest, with big shy eyes, grabbed Emily's blouse and whispered something. She leaned in and replied softly, trying to remain calm. As absurd as it all seemed, Daniel knew it wasn't a delusion. These children didn't just resemble him, they were his. The elevator ascended in silence. Daniel accompanied them to the presidential suite, and for the first time in years, completely ignored the commitments he had scheduled for that night. He called his assistant and cancelled everything. Dinner with investors, a meeting with the board, international calls. That night, nothing mattered more than understanding what was happening. Emily took the children to the room, while he stayed in the main living area of the suite, watching the city through the window. The rain was still falling heavily over Los Angeles, but something inside him had already changed. When she returned to the living area, her hair still damp, Emily wasted no time. "They are 6.5 years old," she said firmly. Daniel did the math in seconds. It matched perfectly. His face tightened. "They said the samples had been discarded," he replied. "They weren't," she countered. "The fertility bank contacted me 2 months after the divorce, and there was an authorization with your signature." Daniel felt his throat go dry. He had never signed that, and in that instant, both realized that the problem was much deeper than they had imagined. Daniel gripped the backrest of the chair in front of him. His hand trembled slightly. He wasn't the type of man who handled surprises well, and this one was definitely off his radar. "I never signed that," he muttered through clenched teeth. Emily slowly nodded. "I know. I found out later. But when I realized, I was already pregnant." Her voice still carried the dignity it always had, but now it bore a weight he had never noticed before. It was as if those years had shaped a new version of Emily, stronger, more sober, more real. The memory of the divorce came flooding back like an avalanche, toxic, cold, full of accusations. Daniel, blinded by the paranoia of protecting his growing fortune, had changed all the locks on his house the very day he signed the papers. He trusted no one at that time. And as much as pride tried to hide it, there was a lingering regret there, always ready to surface when he remembered what they had together. "If I had told you, would you have believed me?" Emily asked, her eyes fixed on his. And Daniel had no answer. At that moment, one of the children, the same girl with the wet notebook, appeared in the living area with a paper in her hand. "Do you want to see my drawing?" she asked with a shy smile. Daniel took the paper and swallowed hard. It depicted 5 figures holding hands under the rain. 4 small ones, 1 large, all smiling. It was simple, childlike, but somehow captured exactly what he was feeling. The chaos of the outside world, contrasting with the hope that something new could bloom inside. "It's very beautiful," he managed to say. The girl smiled. "Mommy says sometimes the best things happen when it rains." And maybe she was right, because despite all the confusion, the impact, the revelations, there was something in that moment that Daniel couldn't explain. It was as if that storm had cleaned more than just the city streets. It had also cleansed something within him. For the first time in a long while, he felt he wasn't looking back. He was looking forward. And not alone. Later that night, with the children now dry, dressed in hotel pajamas that looked like oversized costumes, the presidential suite took on another tone. Valentina, the girl with the notebook, sat on the rug drawing, her damp hair still held together by a broken clip. Mateo, the most curious, inspected every TV and remote control like a little engineer in action. Diego, the quietest, had taken refuge with a book in a corner, while Camila, who seemed older or perhaps just more focused, looked after her siblings with an almost adult protective instinct. Daniel watched all of this from the doorway, silently. Emily emerged from the bathroom with her hair down, wearing a simple hotel blouse and a tired yet serene expression. "They're quadruplets," she said, as if handing over a key. They were born at 33 weeks, and they spent almost a month in the hospital. Daniel quickly calculated. The timeline made too much sense to be ignored. He sat on the arm of the sofa and ran his hands through his hair, feeling the weight of the discovery. "They are amazing," he murmured. Emily nodded. "And they're yours." The phrase hung in the air like a verdict. No anger, no recriminations, just the raw truth. Daniel tried to understand why none of this had come to light before. Emily had never asked him for anything, not a cent, not any rights, nothing. She had simply vanished from his life and raised 4 children who, in some way, carried pieces of him, in their faces, in their behavior, in their gestures. "You should have told me," he whispered. Emily looked him squarely in the eye. "And would you have listened, Daniel? The man who believed everyone wanted to take something away from him." The question hurt more than he cared to admit. One of the children coughed in the living room, a dry, persistent cough. Emily immediately got up. "It's Diego. He has asthma. The cold and the humidity, they worsen it." She dashed to her purse, searched for the inhaler, and then stopped. He left it in the taxi. His suitcase had the medications. Daniel immediately got up. The instinct of a businessman gave way to something more, primal, urgency. "I have a doctor who can come now." Emily hesitated. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," he interrupted, already grabbing the phone. "It's the least I can do." For the first time that night, his voice carried a different weight. It was personal, and he knew he couldn't fail. While they waited for the doctor, Daniel observed the movement of those little lives in the suite, as if he were watching a movie about someone else. Mateo explained to him how the inhaler worked for his brother with an almost clinical precision, as if he wanted to make sure Daniel understood everything. Valentina drew Diego surrounded by angels, to protect him from within, as she explained. Camilla rearranged the pillows and blankets with a maturity unexpected of a 6-year-old. Daniel couldn't tell if what he was witnessing was beautiful or painful. He only knew it was real. The phone kept vibrating. Messages from the assistant, alerts on his purse, reminders of meetings. The investors in the Tokyo project were threatening to pull out. The stocks were starting to fall, but he simply ignored it all. For the first time in years, he mentally disconnected from the corporate world, because at that moment, sitting next to an asthmatic child struggling to breathe, no market percentage mattered. None of that was worth more than what was happening there. For the first time, he was at the center of a crisis that couldn't be solved with money or spreadsheets, and that terrified him. When the doctor arrived, administered the treatment and confirmed that Diego was out of immediate danger, Daniel exhaled as if he hadn't breathed properly since the night began. Gabriella, who now seemed more comfortable with the situation, nodded slightly in thanks, but said nothing more. Daniel, for his part, could only look at her and those children, trying to piece everything together. "They need stability," she finally said. "We're not going to stay here forever. It was just one emergency night." But deep inside, Daniel knew that something had changed. He wasn't ready to let them go. Not again. "Stay," he said, in a low but firm voice, "at least until Diego gets better, and after that, we'll see." Gabriella looked at him with distrust, but there was something else in her eyes, something that reminded her of the good old days, perhaps hope, perhaps exhaustion, or maybe just the feeling that, for the first time, Daniel was saying something sincere. She didn't respond immediately. Camilla, who had been listening in silence, came over and took his hand. "Can we stay?" she asked in a gentle yet firm voice. It was then that Daniel realized the decision might no longer be solely his. Too many people were involved to simply run away. The next morning, Daniel couldn't sleep. As the sun rose over Los Angeles, he reviewed old documents, divorce contracts, and, above all, the papers from the fertility bank. Something didn't add up. That supposed authorization with his signature? It never existed, or rather, it should never have existed. That was the key piece in a setup he still couldn't fully understand. But what hurt the most was knowing that, out of pride and paranoia, he had spent 6 years distancing himself from a story that could have been the best of his life. In the midst of that silent investigation, Matteo appeared at the door of the suite's improvised office. "Are those the plans for your hotels?" he asked curiously, pointing at the tablet screen. Daniel nodded, still half surprised by the child's genuine interest. "This is the Imperial," he explained. "It has a different design because of the wind." Matteo walked in with more confidence and added, "I noticed. The curved facade disperses the pressure. It's brilliant." Daniel almost laughed, not out of mockery but in surprise. That child spoke with a clarity and attention to detail he had only seen in very experienced adults. And suddenly he was struck by the thought that the child wanted to know more about him, about all of them. Shortly after, Gabriella entered the room with Camilla by her side. "We need to talk about the next few days," she said directly. "I don't want them to feel like we're taking advantage of the situation." Daniel was about to respond when Valentina appeared running. "Diego isn't well." The four of them hurried to the room. Diego was pale, sweaty, struggling to breathe. Camilla held his hand, and Valentina nervously scribbled on the floor, as if trying to ward off anxiety, with colored pencils. "It's the asthma," Gabriella said, already kneeling by the bed. "The change in weather, the stress. I knew something like this could happen." Daniel didn't hesitate for a second. He called the doctor again, contacted the pharmacy, and signaled the driver to fetch whatever was necessary. This was no longer a distant situation. This was his family. Even though Gabriella still maintained a barrier, even though the children still called him Mr. Harper, he knew that that bond, as new and unexpected as it was, already existed, and it was growing stronger by the minute. He couldn't erase what he hadn't lived, but maybe there was still time to build something real out of it. The treatment worked, and Diego began to breathe more easily. The storm from the previous night gave way to a gray sky, but one that was less aggressive. Daniel watched Gabriella as she carefully organized the medications. There was a calm in her that he didn't remember from the days they were married. Maybe it was motherhood, maybe it was life without him, but one thing was certain. She had faced all of that alone, without support, without money, without anyone to share the burden. And yet, the four of them were there, strong, smart, united. Daniel felt a pang of shame. What frightened him most was realizing that he himself might never have been capable of forming a family in that way. His world was built on control, on goals, on numbers. But there, in that sweet-turned refuge, there was no room for spreadsheets, only for care and presence, and he knew he had failed in that. "We can stay until Diego gets better," Gabriella said firmly, "but then we'll leave." Daniel nodded, even though deep down he knew that this was far from an ending. The story he had begun to write years ago, even unknowingly, was now demanding a different kind of outcome. Later, at the hotel restaurant, the four siblings explored the menu as if it were an adventure. Daniel watched them with a mix of tenderness and bewilderment. Valentina wanted to draw the dishes. Diego asked polite questions of the waiter. Matteo investigated the ingredients, and Camilla organized the orders with the firmness of a little operations manager. That family scene, which might seem ordinary for any parent, was unprecedented for Daniel, and he realized how much he had lost. How many meals like that he had never experienced. How many "Dad, look at this," he had stopped hearing. Then Marissa, his assistant, appeared at the restaurant door with a tense expression. "They're on the line, the Japanese. They want to talk now." Daniel looked at Gabriella. Then he looked at the children. "I'm busy," he said without leaving his seat. "Tell them I'll call back later." Marissa was taken aback. She had never heard him say that. Gabriela also seemed surprised, but said nothing. And before the silence became unbearable, a familiar voice resonated through the dining room. "Family meeting, is that it?" It was Dolores. Harper, his mother, elegant, imposing, and on the verge of unleashing everything he had been trying to reorganize inside himself. Dolores was not a woman given to half measures. She entered the restaurant like someone walking into a boardroom, firm, direct, occupying space. "So it's true?" she asked, first looking at Gabriela and then at the four little ones. The silence was immediate. The children stopped looking at the menu. Gabriela maintained her composure, but the tension on her face was evident. Daniel took a deep breath. "Yes, Mother, they are my children, and your grandchildren." The words hung in the air for a moment, as if they were too big to fit in that room. Dolores adjusted her purse on her shoulder and fixed her gaze on her son. "I want to talk to you. Now." Daniel slowly got up. "Let's go to the reserved lounge." He knew that tone. He knew his mother wasn't there to welcome or play with her grandchildren. In the private lounge, as soon as they were alone, Dolores fired off. "Are you going to let her manipulate you again? Have you already forgotten everything she tried to do to you? The divorce scandal, the assets. She wanted to destroy you." Daniel ran his hand over his face, tired. "You don't know everything, Mother. There are things from that time that I'm only just beginning to understand." Dolores fell silent for a moment. Then she sat down, visibly upset. "I just wanted to protect you," she said in a softer tone. "After what your father did to me, I swore no one would do the same to you." Daniel didn't reply. Instead, he pulled out his cell phone and showed the last message he had received from Valentina. A simple drawing. 5 people holding hands under the rain, smiling. In the corner, written in crooked letters, "For Mr. Harper, from Valentina." Dolores watched for a few seconds and for the first time seemed to let her guard down a little. She draws well." Daniel stood up, still holding the cell phone. "She is my daughter, Mother, like the other 3. And yes, Gabriela made mistakes, but we both made mistakes. And you know what? I was also responsible for the end of our marriage, for the way I treated her, and for how I allowed you to get involved in things you shouldn't have." Dolores looked at him with a mix of astonishment and pain. "Are you going to take a DNA test at least?" "I don't need to. Just look at them." And then he left the room, not waiting for an answer. He knew that conversation wasn't over. But for the first time, he was willing to face it instead of running away. Hours later, in the silence of the hotel's private library, Daniel sat across from Gabriela, with the children playing in another room. The storm had ceased, but the atmosphere remained heavy. He was trying to understand everything coming to light, and it was Gabriela who spoke first. "There's something you need to know." She calmly explained how she had received the contact from the fertility bank. How, strangely, there was an authorization signed by him allowing the use of the samples. But the gravest part came next. "I found out later that you never signed that, and I know who signed in your place." Daniel felt the blood freeze. "My mother." Gabriela nodded. "She hated me, Daniel, always thought I was with you for your money. And after the divorce, when you changed the locks and disappeared, she was left with only those children. She didn't want to look for you. Not out of pride, out of fear. Fear of being, he called a liar, fear that you'd think she was trying to hold you back." Her voice wavered for the first time that night. Daniel looked at the floor, unable to face Gabriela. He was beginning to piece the puzzle together, but the pieces hurt. The door slowly opened and Camila entered holding Diego's hand. "Sorry to interrupt you, but he wanted to show you his drawing." Diego extended a sheet with a rough drawing of a large house with several windows. "Is this our new home?" Daniel took the paper with trembling hands. "Do you want it to be?" Diego nodded. And it was at that moment that something inside Daniel broke. Because until then, all of this was just a crisis to resolve. But in that moment, he realized he was facing an opportunity to start over, to build something real, not just with Gabriela, but with those 4 little lives that in some way were screaming for his presence. After they both left, Daniel looked at Gabriela. "I don't want to keep running. I want to fix this. Not just the mess, but everything, us, the kids, whatever you need." Gabriela fell silent. "I don't want money, Daniel. I just want them to have the chance to know their father. And if you're going to be in their lives, it has to be for real, not like a hotel visitor." He nodded. "I'm here." And in that moment, for the first time in years, they shared a look that carried no guilt or fear, just a shared uncertainty. Could it be too late to try again? The next day, something unexpected happened. Dolores, who had always kept an emotional distance from everything she couldn't control, appeared in the suite unannounced. But this time, there was something different about her. She carried an old photo album in her hands. "If they are going to be part of the family, they need to know where they come from," she said, entering slowly. Gabriela was helping the children draw, but she paused upon seeing her mother-in-law, or ex-mother-in-law, there, with that vulnerable expression she had never witnessed before. Camilla was the first to approach. "Are you our grandmother?" Dolores hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, and I have so much to learn from you." During the morning, the children took turns flipping through the album with her. Daniel watched from afar, unsure if he believed what he was seeing. Dolores, the woman who had built an emotional empire based on rigidity, now smiled with every comment from Valentina, explained old photos to Mateo, and allowed Camilla to organize the images in chronological order. Even Diego, the shyest, leaned on her in silence for a few minutes. It was as if time, for an instant, had slowed down. Gabriela remained mostly silent, but did not interfere. She observed, recorded, and it seemed she understood that, as improbable as it was, this was a beginning. Later, while the 4 were running down the hotel hallway, Daniel found his mother sitting alone, leafing through the now-closed album. "I never thought I'd say this, but they're amazing." Daniel sat down next to her. "Did you put all this together?" he asked bluntly. Dolores took a deep breath. "I didn't want her to be part of your life. I was scared. Scared you'd get lost, like your father. Scared you'd suffer, like I did. So I made decisions for you, and now I see that I robbed you of the chance to experience something real." Her voice trembled. "Is it still possible to do things right?" Daniel looked up, tears welling in his eyes. "I don't know, but I want to try." Daniel placed his hand over hers. "Then let's start there." He gestured toward the hallway, where the 4 little ones were pushing each other and laughing as if the world had nothing more important to offer. "Now you have grandchildren, Mother, and I have a family." The next morning, Daniel woke before everyone else. For the first time in a long while, he didn't open the company email, nor check the stock market. He simply sat still, observing the quiet room where his children slept together, huddled under the blankets. The sun began to peek through the window, golden tinging their faces, and there, in that unexpected peace, he made a decision. It wasn't just about staying. It was about being present, truly present. With all the mistakes, delays and scars, he wanted to start over. But now with the awareness that lost time never comes back and that the present is what's most valuable. Gabriela was in the suite's kitchen, preparing coffee with one of the hotel employees. "I was thinking of looking for an apartment around here," he said, entering with measured steps. Big enough for them and with space for you too, if you want. She raised her eyebrows. Daniel, all of this is very recent. He nodded. I know. But it's also very real. And I don't want to keep living as if nothing had happened. Gabriella took a deep breath. And the project in Tokyo. The Japanese are still waiting for your response. Daniel gave a half smile. They'll wait a little longer. Next week is the first day of school. The answer took Gabriella by surprise. Are you going to leave an international project to stay here because of their school? He shrugged. I've already lost too many things. I'm not going to lose this too. She looked at him for a few seconds, as if trying to detect some hidden lie, some trick, but there was none. Daniel was serious. Okay, he finally said, but if we're staying, it has to be our way. They don't need a sponsor, they need a father. And I don't need a hero. I need someone I can trust. He extended his hand. Can I start over? Gabriella didn't take his hand, but she smiled. Maybe. We'll see. And in that instant, something changed between them. It wasn't an automatic return to the past. It was a construction, something new based on everything they had learned apart. Later, when the four returned from the walk with Dolores, Valentina ran to them with a new drawing. It was the layout of a restaurant. Next to it, a garden, and at the top, a word written in childish letters, family. Daniel looked at the drawing and then at Gabriella. Are we going to open that place? She looked at the children, then at him. If it's with them nearby, maybe it will be the best project of our lives. Days later, the new apartment was ready. It was in Westwood, not far from the hotel, a spacious place with enough rooms for the children, a fully equipped kitchen for Gabriella, and an office for Daniel. But the most important thing wasn't the luxury. It was the sense of belonging. Valentina's drawings already adorned the walls. Camilla arranged everything meticulously. Matteo transformed a corner of the living room into an investigation station. Diego hung a poem on his bedroom door. This was no longer just a place to sleep. It was becoming a home. On the first day of school, Daniel made sure to drive everyone himself. It was the first time in years he drove the family car. He was nervous. He wasn't sure if it was harder to close a negotiation with the Japanese or to drop off 4 children at a new school with a prestigious name and a story that had already leaked to the media. Gabriella discreetly took his hand before they left the car. They'll be fine, she said. And he believed her. Because despite everything, those children had already faced far more than most would in an entire lifetime. At the school's entrance, as Daniel watched his children enter in their new uniforms, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. But not the kind of pride that comes from numbers or corporate achievements. It was something else, more human. Pride in having created a space where 4 children could grow up being who they are. Without fear, without masks. That was enough. For the first time in a long while, Daniel wasn't thinking about outcomes, only about presence. Back at the hotel, he found Marissa, his assistant, waiting with a report. The investors agreed to postpone the project, and they want to schedule a new meeting with you and Gabriella. He raised an eyebrow. With Gabriella? Marissa smiled. They want to include her restaurant as a model of a cultural project in the hotel group. Daniel fell silent for a second, then he smiled. Then we'll show them what real food is, and what a real family is. That night, everyone had dinner together at the new apartment. Blue pasta made by Valentina's and Camilla's little hands under the supervision of Chef Lorenzo, who had now become a frequent visitor. Dolores brought a bottle of wine, and even Marissa appeared, more relaxed, like someone who finally understood her place. Around the table there were laughs, flour scattered on the floor, discussions about the ideal ravioli format. And at the center of it all, Daniel. Not as a CEO, not as a millionaire, but as a father. After dinner, as he was clearing the plates with Gabriella, she watched him in silence for a few seconds. "Did you know this could happen?" she asked. He gave a shy smile. "No, but I learned that when life throws everything into the air, sometimes it's to show you that you can live better than you ever imagined." He nodded. He still had much to learn, but he was willing. And for the first time, he didn't feel tied to a past that he needed to control. He was open to the present, to imperfection, to what truly matters. On the terrace, the four children observed the lights of Los Angeles. Valentina held a new drawing. It was the same image from that first night. 5 figures under the rain. But now the sun was peaking in the background. Daniel silently joined them, and Camila, with her precocious wisdom, said without looking at him, "I think this is the part where we choose what comes next." Daniel wrapped his arm around the children and replied, "Then let's make this the best chapter." Quote of the day: "Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as storms. It's up to us to decide what to do when the rain stops." And if this story has moved you, you should know that the journey of Daniel and his new family is just beginning. So subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell so you don't miss the continuation of this exciting story. Give it a like if this plot kept you glued until now, and comment which city you're watching us from. We love knowing how far our stories reach. See you in the next part.